Hello everybody, my name is Daulton Nelson and today I'd like to talk about a game I just beat. That game being Sudoku Ball Detective for the Nintendo DS. Sudoku Ball Detective was developed by White Bear Studios, published by PlayLogic Entertainment, and it is a puzzle game. When it comes to pen and paper puzzle games, crosswords and mazes immediately come to mind, as well as Sudoku, a game where the player is given 9 blocks divided into ninths, where they must put the numbers 1 to 9 into said blocks, while making sure that the placing doesn't conflict with a duplicate of the number in the same block, row, or column. It's a pretty popular game, especially when it comes to players who are a bit older. Naturally, this popularity would cause the game to transfer over to video games in the hopes of catching that older audience. I picked this game up from a late uncle who had left his collection of DS games behind. Out of all of these games, Sudoku Ball interested me the most, as I was curious how the developers would take this flat game and spherize it for a video game. I was also interested in playing a game that isn't really something I would voluntarily play, and now that I've played through Sudoku Ball, I can say that I kind of like the game overall, but as you play it, you can clearly tell that this isn't the type of game that's worth much of your attention. And nowhere is that more prevalent than the look of the game. The polygonal, blurry, yet rough and pixelated graphics of the game look very dated. The colors aren't that eye-catching, and the designs can feel very basic, save for a couple of the characters in the story mode. Like Dr. Dinsdale, who's this pipe smoker in a blue suit, but has an orange, bumpy-looking afro. In fact, I would say that Dinsdale is the most interesting looking object in this game. The soundtrack of the game also isn't that memorable. Most of the tunes are serviceable at best. There isn't anything here that'll offend the ears or anything like that. The instruments used for these tracks sound very dated. Most of them sound like they come from the Game Boy Advanced era. Especially if you've played Mario vs. Donkey Kong, you'll recognize these instruments. However, my opinion starts to shift a bit once you get past these elements and see what Sudoku has to offer. When you turn on the game and get to the main menu, you'll see you'll have a variety of options of how you can play, including a classic mode, a way to play standard Sudoku, and even a story mode, which I wasn't expecting to be in this game. The classic and standard modes offer a collection of levels that can be played at easy, medium, or hard difficulty, where the goal is to clear the Sudoku puzzle that is given to you. The story, however, is where the most variety in gameplay can be found. The narrative itself is about the wrongful death of a wealthy character, which prompts the detective, Edward, to investigate the death as a poisoning. Edward goes around the community that the deceased lived in, breaking into private property and rummaging through people's possessions in order to find clues that he can bring back to Dr. Dinsdale. The mystery itself isn't that interesting. The story doesn't spend enough time with characters to become interested in them. Edward doesn't really explain how clues relate to the case, so most of the clues don't even matter. Like, they're just collected for the sole purpose to have something to collect and analyze in the game. But in the middle of doing these tasks, the player will be presented with one of 4 Sudoku Ball games they have to complete. There's the standard Sudoku Ball mode, where you roll around a ball with touch controls to cycle through multiple Sudoku puzzles, and solve certain question-marked blocks in order to reveal clues. This take on Sudoku is actually pretty interesting, as some blocks can be hard to solve unless you roll the ball to a certain angle, thus making the solution more obvious. Although I will say that it doesn't change the game of Sudoku enough, in my opinion. You're still looking at 9 blocks, just at different angles. Another game is lockpicking, where you are presented with a mostly completed Sudoku puzzle, and your job is to solve the middle square in a certain amount of time. Otherwise, one of your 4 lockpicks will break. Then there is a chase game, where you have to solve Sudoku blocks quicker than your target is running away on the top screen of the DS. Finally, there is a clue analyzing game, where you have to solve a harder Sudoku puzzle while a timer runs down. If the timer runs out, random numbers will disappear, so memorization is key to solving these puzzles. For each of the Sudoku puzzles, you'll tap on the block you want to fill a number into. A blank canvas will come up, and you'll naturally draw the number you want to appear in the block. The parsing algorithm that turns your handwriting into a number is actually very accurate, except for the number 3, which for me would normally parse into a 7 or a 1, which was a little weird. The variety in what the game offers in the story mode is very surprising, and I like that quite a lot. But the variety doesn't stop the game from feeling stale after a while. Sudoku Ball feels like it needs some incentive to do things like complete the entire puzzle, or complete the puzzle in a certain amount of time. The puzzles themselves can be pretty engaging, although I think most of that can be attributed to the game of Sudoku rather than Sudoku Ball Detective. The difficulty of the game also scales very well. Some of the puzzles later in the story can be head scratchers. I was spending hours on some of these puzzles. And I think when it comes to thinking about the game as a whole, there were elements that surprised and impressed me, but there were also elements that felt largely uninteresting and needed to be fleshed out a little bit more. So I'm going to give the game a final score of a 5 out of 10. When it comes to games that appeal to older demographics, I think Sudoku Ball Detective is able to stand out as a game with some clear effort and creativity put into it. But put the game in a larger context, and it becomes clear that it just doesn't stack up as even an above average game. Still, if you like puzzle games, I see no problems in picking this up. After all, I was engaged when it came to the puzzles, and for some, that could be all that they need. That concludes my review of Sudoku Ball Detective. If you like my reviews, you can like, comment, or subscribe. I also have social media links down in the description below, as well as a link to my online Portfolum to see video game design works that I have done. And with that out of the way, please make sure to have a nice day.